Okay, so thanks for everybody to join this conversation. This is we're going to discuss how we can simplify adding new replicable items to Geo. Let's get to the agenda here. I've added a few suggestions we could use to like start the conversation.
Where's the agenda? It doesn't show up in the invite.
It's the same GitLab Geo discussion document. I will paste here.
Okay.
It's the first item there.
Thank you, Gabriel.
So I will start, and then we can perhaps collect the general impressions that everybody has about the difficulties and maybe things that we can improve, etc. So my understanding of our current code base is that to add something new to Geo, something that is replicable, there is a lot of classes and objects that we need to create, and they are not so obvious. It's different than adding something like a controller or model or view to Rails. This is something that we build ourselves, and it's not built in a way that looks like a framework or something like that. It's more or less something that we started doing for projects, then we started doing for uploads, and it's still evolving, but it doesn't have like this framework or this library feeling. So perhaps this is something we could work on. Do you have anything to say, Douglas?
Sorry, I didn't have time to go through these things before the call, but yeah, I think that the way that you build the application, there's a lot of room for improvements. And I think that you can start to think about how to reduce the number of steps required to add a new type. I was trying to build a list of these steps so you can make clear what are the necessary steps that you need to do. So it will make it easier to know which steps you can remove or can compensate on another one. But I think that it's a good point that I need to start to think about, because I created a list of all the data types that are created by GitLab, and there's a lot that we didn't replicate yet. So I think that if you have time to start thinking about this can help us to make it simpler to replicate these other data types.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be able to comment very much on the technical details here, but I looked at the list, and I think at the moment we replicate 9 out of 19 data types, because I mean, this is not so bad as it sounds, right? We replicate the majority, I think, of the data, but I think I can see that as GitLab grows, there will be more data added over time, right? And I think, at least from my sort of high-level background, is I worked a lot on projects where you had many different data sources, right? So different databases and things that you had to consume, so more like an ETL framework, and having a standard way of saying, hey, you want to replicate something or you want to add something, right? And something that people can easily understand, I think is extremely valuable, because otherwise it just doesn't scale. And if it is a bespoke effort every single time, and you need to figure it out, it's very expensive, because it means that, you have different solutions for different things, and it becomes harder and harder to understand. And so I really, at least from my very high level understanding, effort spent now making it more standardized, so that in the future we can say, hey, like either to other teams, if you want this to, if you want this to be replicated via Geo, this is the way, right? Or like even for us to be able to say like, it takes us, let's say a couple of weeks, and usually it's fine. Like something that makes it enjoyable for you is also not bad.
Yeah, I had this impression that perhaps we should think about some abstractions that we could use to name the different steps. I think an ETL is a good starting point, because we are, in a sense, we are extracting data from one side and populating in another location. It requires some level of like sorting things out from here to here. Another thing that I look at that could help us model this abstraction is event sourcing. Event sourcing can be used to reconstruct the state of an object based on different events that has to be executed in a sequence. So in this way, it's different from Geo because we don't care about the sequence, we don't care about the ordering. But there are a few things in event sourcing that resembles what we are doing with Geo. I also think that it would be really nice if we could perhaps move some of the logic to the app folder. So ideally, we will have like the Geo replication as a feature, as a library in GitLab, and we will add like, okay, this is a Geo source, this is a Geo event, or this is a Geo transformation or whatever. This is a Geo service, like to get data and to send data or something. This kind of abstractions, which we could have like this standardized package that we just write for something new and reuse, and everybody understands, etc.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I also think that the idea of getting what the list of things that you wrote down would be a very good starting point.
I have it open.
Oh, can you link us?
Yes.
Looks like Valery's joined the conversation as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you just need to take care when trying to extract this framework, is because we have some data types that's not related to database models. And I think that most of them will require a lot of different settings or data on the secondary to be replicated. So we need to think about this as well.
Yeah, if we have something more like an active model than an active record, perhaps we can reuse for different things. Hey, Valery.
Hey, sorry guys, I decided to disconnect from this world for a moment, and of course I forgot that we have a meeting.
Hi, Valery.
No problem. We were discussing some ideas and alternatives to improve how we model the replication. I think it will be useful for us to get your first impression as you're doing a new replication right now. What do you feel that it's the most difficult part? And perhaps you can validate what we have already discussed.
Yeah, so the most difficult part is that we don't have any template for that. So, and this thing is that the design of around all the registries we have is like well how it's called, well polished, and so we fixed like thousands of bugs. So every detail, every condition does make sense. But when you just copy it and adopt it to your needs, you lose much of this, much of those important details. And so I expect like hundreds of bugs in Docker registry, and that's the problem. Yeah, it's one of the problems. Yeah, second one, it's actually a lot of code to implement something. Yeah, but I don't know if it is possible to came up with some generic solution for all type of resources, because they are all different, and so I don't know if we can come up with something better than what we have now. And actually, I think the most of things we would need to think, we already think. So probably it's not the best area to focus on, probably. But
I mean, this is interesting because Douglas did some work, and he found 19 different like data types, right, that are being generated by GitLab. We have no priority order on this, right? As in, we don't know how important all of them are. But of those 19, I think we currently replicate 9. So that's I think, I'm not saying we should do all, but I think what we need to be able to do is say why we don't do some of them, right? And because I think otherwise, if we talk about disaster recovery or things like this, people will ask questions.
Yeah, well, I didn't know we have so much. Can you give some example what we don't think?
Yeah, the list is on the chat. You can.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the solution that we have today is very simple, but yeah, we need a lot of code to implement it. So if you can keep this solution, but try to reduce the code necessary to run it, I think that will be a good start. And I think that the biggest problem nowadays is, for example, for doc registry, I have been following the merge request that Valery have been working on. I think the biggest problem is to understand how the Docker registry works inside GitLab, which are the points that we need to track an event or not. I think that's the pain point that we have right now. For example, yesterday I was investigating about the design repositories. Looks like that will be very easy, but I tried this locally and nothing worked out of the box on the Geo side for LFS objects. And you need to start thinking how you can try to make easier to find these points that you need to add this, that you need to track the events for Geo. I think that this is the hard part nowadays.
Yeah, I think we are integrating so many different applications that are out of the scope of GitLab Rails itself, and that adds complexity. I imagine that you had to learn how Docker protocol works, at least on a high level, to see how you will have to send like JSON files from one side to the other, and how to download things and authenticate in a way that the Docker registry accepts your connection, etc. So this for sure is the complex part. But in another sense, by looking at the list of things that we don't replicate yet, it does look like it's mostly files. They should all have their own metadata, and maybe they have their different way of authenticating. But in that sense, it shouldn't be different, most of the code, than replicating LFS objects or perhaps Docker containers. In a way that you have to have a finder that figures out what will be processed in a way. Where do you download from here? Where do you upload here? And saving things in between. So there's a lot of things in common that perhaps you can create some abstractions and reuse things. One thing that I think we could simplify earlier is the amount of code we need to do to create the workers for Geo. I think they are all look mostly like the same. They have a dispatcher, they have a single worker, and they execute a service class. So in this sense, they are all generic in a way, and the only thing that changes are the parameters and which service class is called. But they mostly look like the same thing. So if we could cut this, I think it's at least three worker classes per replicable item. So it's three things less that we have to do.
Yeah, but we already do this. So we have, I think Douglas had created a separate class, so we just extend it for every resource. So it is something that already existed. For example, for Docker registry, I just extended the class, and so it didn't require too much work.
But perhaps we should, instead of having like 10 different dispatchers, have a single one.
Yeah,
just have a unit per item or something like that.
Have one dispatcher for all kind of data types. It's a problem because they start, for example, we need to sync 1,000 repositories and 1,000 upload files. So you need to split the concurrence. So.
Okay, yeah, we limit by the concurrency.
Yes. So what I think about the points that you put on the documents are more related to how do we generate the events on the primary node. And I was recently thinking about how we can improve the replication on the secondary nodes. I noticed that our workers that are responsible to try to figure out what files we didn't science it yet, or which repositories didn't science it yet on the secondary, are very dumb. We need to go through the entire database, try to find everything. I was trying to think how we can make them a little more smarter, because sometimes we are replicating the same repository 3 or 4 times in a row. So I think that we have a lot of room for improvement on the secondary side than on the primary. My main point that I was thinking about recently is how we can get rid of the dependence of the read-only database to figure out what I need to sync on the secondary nodes, and using just the tracking database as the single source of truth. This is something that I'm thinking about recently. I think that we are able to do this because the queries, even the FDW queries, are very expensive. And we are adding more data types, and we need to run more queries, and those queries are very expensive. I think that this is a good point that you can start to think about how we can make our workers and on the secondary more smart. For example, sometimes if you don't have a active instance like GitLab.com, the workers will be performing those expensive queries a lot of times, and we don't have a lot of data to sync. So You need to think if they can, okay, I didn't found nothing that I need to sync right now. So, okay, I will try to sync, just check in the next hour, because we already have the log cursor running. And for example, if your repository get updated on the primary, you have this event in our event log, and the secondary node will trigger the sync again. So I think that these schedulers, they are really good for improve the speed of the backfill process. But after the backfill is done, I think that they are just spend a lot of resources in the machine. I don't know, you need to think about this.
Yeah, I think it makes sense maybe to slow down the backfilling. But for example, for uploads, we don't have events for when something is uploaded and something is deleted. So there is no other way other than just running the backfilling. Perhaps this is something we can fix, and that will improve a lot, because we will not have to be doing expensive queries just to get new uploads on board. But at the same time, we should probably have something done that we could just like plug, like, okay, add this event, add this event, add this event, and then like this library will handle it in a way. Another thing that I was thinking about, perhaps we could simplify the database architecture in a way that we could use different types that are available in Postgres instead of just creating multiple columns. So we could use a single table for all data types, and maybe just using JSON-B for the extra bits that we need to hold. Like for projects, we have like I don't know, a project ID or a hash something. Like this metadata that requires us to creating at least two tables, one item in the Geo event log and another like Geo event log repository something. This can also perhaps be simplified now that we have Postgres entirely to us. But we have to be careful at the same time, because when we are doing joins against the primary, we need those fields. But all other fields that are not primary keys can perhaps be in a like this metadata JSON field.
I think the problem with big tables is that they are hard to manage, and so it is possible that we create more problems than we make it simpler. And so having lots of tables is hard too. But so I think it's it is always about trade-off. Yeah, it is better to have.
Can I ask a high-level question? And you have to, ignore my ignorance. Sorry?
Sorry?
Oh, okay.
You got cut off, Valery, sorry.
Sorry, what is happening?
Okay, perhaps you go, Fabian.
Okay, so I had a question. So I spoke with Ash a little while ago, and he mentioned, but I'm not sure I understood him correctly, that people were thinking about, for example, potentially spinning out Geo as well as a separate gem, or actually separating it from the main application. And I have no idea if that's a good or a bad idea, right? But I was just thinking, if, like one thing that I think Douglas said and you guys said is like, we have all of these different data types, right? And we're straying sort of further away from Ruby on Rails, right? It's like there are other problems that we need to tackle, right? And also, not everybody using GitLab, necessarily needs to use Geo, right? So we can obviously still bundle this, but are there potential advantages in having it like as a separate thing? Because it is maybe a separate problem. Like I don't know. I recall that came up, and I just wanted to bring up that point because it seemed relevant.
I think we explored this idea when we were recreating Geo as the version 2 or 3, and when we came up with the Geo Lock Cursor, I believe the idea was that it could be separate from the main Rails application, at least as some sort of microservice that would like handle this, receive this stream of events and do something on the background. But as far as we have been right now, everything that we have been replicating was attached to GitLab Rails in some way. I think Docker is the first thing that was entirely separate, and the other packages will also be probably separate things. Perhaps this could be useful as well, but at the same time, we will have to reinvent Sidekick and everything else that we already rely on, and I don't think this is there will be any big benefit, at least right now.
Yes, and I want to add this, that it's like, it's like bicycle with 10 wheels. So we need to create separate service only when we absolutely need to. We in Geo we use lots of code from GitLab, lots of for validation, verification, for everything. And if we would create separate service, we would need to implement this again, and yeah, that would make things harder. But yeah, there are benefits too. Yeah, but mostly we would make it more complex. I think so.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Something that I remember right now that I started enjoying the GitLab demo calls every week, and they are demoing the GitLab AJ, and they are doing some work to replicate data between GitLab nodes, the repository data. This is something that I think that in the future you can start using to replicate data between Geo nodes as well. You have a GitLab node on the primary and a GitLab node on the secondary, and you can use this mechanism to synchronize the data in the repositories. So you can get right off of what you do in the GitLab and do this directly on the GitLab level.
I already spoke with James Ramsey regarding this like a week or a week and a half ago, because they are like doing this at the moment, because I was interested, because I think the notion is that, like if Gitly was able to, because I think there is a push for high availability for Gitly, and if we could essentially use some of this as well, we may solve quite a few problems for us, right, just by leveraging Gitly. But I'm not sure. Like I think this is still a longer process, but it may be worthwhile interacting a little bit more, just so that we don't miss the train, right?
Yeah, it's something that they should keep an eye on it. And I think that they are using the same approach to verify the repositories as well, the checksum of the refs. So I think that basically the same code, but the application happens in a lower level.
Yeah, there is one big difference of how they do replication. I believe they do it more as synchronously. So when something is pushed to a repository, it's immediately replicated to the other. And this works fine when you're in a local network, but when you are in a remote location, you have like the congestion of the either the data center connection or internet connection, etc. So it may not work as well for us in that way. But if they decide to also implement something that is more asynchronously, as optionally, as an optional way of synchronizing, then perhaps, yeah, we could use it. I think we could say that one alternative as an actionable item for this discussion is to try to document every step required to create a new item. So this would be an issue to do that, and then figure out if there are simplification steps we can do, either by extracting things into a generic class that can be inherited or something like that. And I will try to see if there is any possibility of creating abstractions, and then we can discuss again. I think yeah, that's at least something we could do.
Sure, I think that makes sense. I would also like to suggest, for example, Valery is working on the container hash replication, and I'm starting work on the application of the custom hooks. So while you are doing the code review, if you see something that you can do with some small refactors to make it more generic, I think that's a good idea as well.
Yeah, one thing I think would be like a quick win is to just move files to similar location. We have many things spread out in lib something. Perhaps just by moving files to a similar folder will help us understand better how Geo is working.
Yeah, I think that we also had an issue about the schedulers on the secondary nodes to remove the inheritance, use concerns. So perhaps it's a good issue to start thinking about how you can refactor this code.
Yeah, I made an issue already. I added it to the epic and I move it into the geo planning board, so I don't forget about it, and then we can iterate on that.
Cool.
Does anyone have anything else to say?
Gabriel, I have so many things to say. I think the only real like work comment that I have is that I really enjoy the process of thinking about these things and having it a little bit more like structured for myself, you know, to say like, okay, this is the problem, but it becomes a lot more concrete when you see a table and it says like, well, we have these 19 things, we kind of need to handle them properly, you know, what can we do, you know, and then you think about improvements, and I think it's fun for me. So I'm enjoying it. And I always learn a lot listening to you. So I think that's also really nice.
Okay, so thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.